Okay.
Judge, go ahead.
Okay, according to the agenda, we should be getting the minutes.
Yes, yes. We want to let everybody introduce themselves briefly. Did you hear me?
Oh, sorry,
Yes.
Ben Goldberger, Commissioner.
Thank you, Ben.
In Rousseau,
Leslie Harris, Commissioner. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ann.
in Rousseau, Commissioner.
Ms. Reyes,
You're muted.
you're muted. Let's see. It looks like she is now. No, there she is.
There she goes.
Okay,
Go ahead.
you hear me?
Yes,
Reyes Colte Yechea, Commissioner.
thank you. So go ahead, Judge. Now we can go into the agenda.
Yes. And the first thing on the agenda was approving the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes as drafted for the July 30 meeting.
Second.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay,
Aye.
I'm still trying to get in on my computer.
Okay. Let me take it to the next step then if you're having difficulties.
Please. Okay.
So as the agenda obviously was public, Susan, do you mind putting the agenda in the chat as well so that folks that didn't see it can see it? But the first order is for us to discuss housing issues. We are fortunate to have members of the Fair Housing Commission as well as their will sort of engage us in this major issue. Obviously, as we know, housing is always, at least in recent history, been a part of a major issue in the city. But obviously, with COVID, made things even worse. But we know that as of late, the governor has extended a moratorium, I believe, till October, if I'm not mistaken, for to prevent evictions and foreclosures in the state. So that's actually obviously a good thing. But we wanted to have a discussion with members of the Fair Housing Commission to talk about these issues and to learn from them too. They are a commission, not exactly like ours, but these folks have been commissioners for quite some time, and we're hoping to learn from them. So we welcome Will Anoha and Eagle. I'll say Eagle Zeddy, who's also one of the commissioners. I think.
Evandro, if I may,
Go ahead.
Good try, man. Good try.
on my screen at least, we've lost the judge. I think we're down to 3 people.
Round to 3. Okay.
So I don't know if if someone could maybe text them the call-in number.
Yes.
Oh, wait, we got.
well, we just got Margaret back.
We just got
Okay.
the chair back, but
I'll text the
if
judge.
it's just a matter of waiting a couple minutes so that the judge could call back in, he should be able to hear.
Sure. I'll text him as well. So obviously this is the new Zoom, new way of living, right? New way of doing business. Not with all its difficulties.
Yeah, and like you said, Evandro, everybody gets a turn in the barrel.
Right. I'll text the judge real quick.
Did somebody else have a problem or?
Yes.
My
Yep.
computer literally died. You killed my computer. Not my internet, my computer died. So now I'm on my phone, which I would have been sooner on my phone, but it's a brand new phone, so I had to download Zoom. It's like, I give up. Anyway, I
Madam Chair,
apologize.
when your computer died, the judge called the meeting to order, and we did
Great.
approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting. And Susan announced the recording, and now we're just trying to see if the judge can come back either by phone or computer or
Okay,
something.
all right, that's too bad. And then he went away. He did his job, and then that was it. He was gone. Okay. So I apologize. I don't know what happened. But thank you to the judge when he comes back. Let me just make a few remarks. First, let me say I apologize. And I'm just glad I have another device that I can use. I just wanted to say I had made brief comments before about internet access, which we've talked about in previous meetings, and how important it is for the school year coming up. And I also say for how important it is, I think, in terms of telehealth and others. And I think Evandro and I will spend some time over the next couple of weeks really delving into it and seeing if we can get the information from the various folks who are working on this so we can report to you where we are and see if we can gather folks together and have a plan. A number of people in the city are working on this, and maybe we can serve as a gathering place or a convener to see everyone who's working on this and where we need to go to make sure that everyone has some kind of access, because everyone needs it, whether or not you're in school or your family, because telehealth has become a huge part of life today. And for people who are underserved, telehealth certainly is going to be something can be something that will be certainly helpful to them. So Evandro, do you have remarks today, or you can certainly be the one to introduce our guests?
I had actually just done that, but
Okay.
let's see. I did want to, one second, please. I did want to say a couple more things.
Yep.
Which is this. The other thing that came up last time was along with the digital divide, was the conversation potentially about food deserts in the city.
Right.
That Yusufi Valley from the Immigrant Advancement brought up. I since began doing some small digging. I talked to Catalina Lopez Espina, who is the director of the Mayor's Office for Food Access. Preliminarily, she told me that essentially there is no food deserts, if you will, in the city, but I guess she called it food swamps. There are some areas in the city that folks do not have access to healthy food as much as they should. I guess across the city, along with the Greater Boston Food Bank, they come up with a study that showed that in 2016, about 18% of the people of the city of Boston had food insecurity, which essentially meant that folks were on the brink of maybe going hungry. And obviously, as you probably can imagine, some parts of the city are higher than other parts of the city. For instance, in Roxbury and some parts of Mission Hill, as much as 27% of the people are in food insecurity possible situations. And places like West Roxbury, only about 8%. So that's one point that I wanted to just bring up, because I know that was one of the issues that come up. Obviously, Catalina said she can come up and talk to us more about it if that's something we want to discuss further. Also, the other thing that came up last time was about MCAD, particularly as related to the, this percentage of cases in the city of Boston and such. In fact, I should give a shout out to the chair of the MCAD, who I believe is present with us momentarily, Sunila George Thomas. They actually just sent us some information in document format that we're going to review more to see, again, to kind of get a sense of what kind of cases that they get in the city of Boston, to help us sort of figure out what we'll do to supplement that, right? And I guess the next couple of things I'll discuss briefly is about some of the things I brought up last time, essentially about how we're going to operate. We, the team, particularly Susan, has drafted an intake form that we can hopefully have the commission next time vote on. We also, as you know, Madam Chair, I've been working on a mission statement, an official written mission statement that we've looked at other cities across the country and even in Canada to come up with something that maybe makes sense and hopefully have everyone, again, look at it and vote on an official mission statement, which will obviously go on the website and guide us going forward. Finally, the other thing that I mentioned is, actually this was suggested by one of the commissioners, is to potentially come up with a master plan, if you will, or milestone to kind of guide us through the next several months as we go into FY 2021. So we're drafting something like that as well, to just kind of keep us in check about when we hope to accomplish certain things as we go into
Sure.
August, September, October, and such. So we can kind of look forward as well. So I'm drafting, the team is drafting that as well, okay?
Sure.
And finally-
Benchmarks, right.
Benchmarks, thank you, benchmarks. Well put. Finally, I mentioned this before we officially started the meeting, but one of the things that's become obvious to me is that our communication method has to change maybe. I think the sending emails occasionally with documents, and it hasn't been the best way to do things. One of the things I suggested earlier was potentially to come up with maybe a Google Drive where we all have access to, and we can put documents in there for you guys to review in preparation for the meeting. So that's the other thing I wanted to kind of put on the table again. I think actually earlier Ann was saying that she didn't potentially receive one of the emails. So I know all of you are bombarded with emails every day. So I'm trying to find a way for us to sort of streamline information and get it to you as the best way possible. So those are a few things that I wanted to kind of, again, flag for you as we go into to the more substantive discussion today. Obviously, I'll lead into that one, which is the next topic in the agenda, which is housing, right? We know, again, I mentioned earlier, housing is a big issue in the city. We also know that most recently there was a study from Suffolk that showed that there was tremendous discrimination happening, particularly amongst people dealing with renters with vouchers and Black renters. So, we thought it would be prudent to bring some folks from the Fair Housing Commission to talk to us about this issue, and hopefully learn from them about, how the commission functions too, long term. So they are here with us. Earlier, again, I mentioned their names. The executive director is here. He is Will Onoa. And I see Javier Flores is one of the commission. He's also present. And also my man, I forget, I'm trying to find his name now, because he's, don't hate me, brother. I'll just say Ego Izidi is also one of the commissioners in the Fair Housing Commission. So welcome. We have about, obviously we're a little delayed with time, but hopefully we can spend the next 20 minutes talking and having a discussion about housing and how we can help them, and help the people of the city. That's all I had. That works.
Okay. So first, let me welcome all of you from Fair Housing. We really, really appreciate you joining us, and we apologize for our technology glitches here this evening, and we'd love to hear from you both about your mission, and would also love to hear from you, since the commissioners are here, about how your mandate and how you function in terms of a board and the executive director and intake. A lot of us, we know generally what Fair Housing does, but we'd love to hear from you more specifically, and we'd love to hear how we can be helpful.
All right. I guess, does that mean, should I start?
That means you should start. Welcome.
All right. Thank you for having us here. My name is Will Onoha. I am the Executive Director of the Office of Fair Housing and Equity. I am also accompanied by two great commissioners, Commissioner Eagle Izedi and Commissioner Javier Flores. So I'll give you a quick overview of what we do, and then any of the general specifics, I'm sure the commissioners can jump in, because they're the ones that actually I litigate my cases before, or hear our cases. So the Office of Fair Housing and Equity, our ordinance gives us the ability to investigate all housing discrimination complaints in the city of Boston. There are 14 protected classes in the city of Boston, and just to mention a few of them, those protected classes are race, gender, sex, ethnicity, familial status, military status, income status, age, disability, and national origin. I'm not sure I hit all 14, but that's majority of them, just to give you an understanding of the protected classes that that are entrusted under our care. So anyone who has a housing discrimination complaint can come to our office, and we do an intake. And how it generally works is we do an intake. From there, an investigator, if we find that someone has standing, meaning, and there's only 3 requirements that need to be met in order for someone to have standing. Is the case needs to, the incident or the complaint, the alleged complaint would have need to have happened in the city of Boston. It would have need to have happened within the last, I think, 180 days, so call it 6 months. And it would just have to be something that is within our jurisdiction, meaning that they would have to fall under any of the 14 protected classes, and that's what gives them standing. Upon that being met, the case is looked at as by, I have about generally 4 investigators under me that do the investigation. And if after an investigation is met, there is probable cause, it goes before, if probable cause is found, yes, it goes before the Boston Fair Housing Commission. If the complainant and the respondent don't wish to, or better yet, let's say they can't conciliate, they can't reach an agreement, it will definitely get, then we bring it before the Boston Fair Housing Commission, and the commissioners hear the case based on the merits of the case and make findings based on the case. Several times before it can even get to that level, we encourage parties to conciliate, where this office will make sure that we are part of that conciliation to make sure that the aggrieved party is made whole, and also the respondent is either does something to make the aggrieved party whole. Also, we also recommend that they do some kind of fair housing training with us. You know, we also do this if there's a lack of probable cause as well too. You know, it all depends on what comes out during the conciliation. But by and large, we are the substantial equivalent of HUD. We have all the same powers through our ordinance that HUD has, which has been granted to us through HUD, to investigate any public-private housing entity or any housing provider in the city of Boston for any complaint against or for any discriminatory practices or complaints against discriminatory practices in housing. So that's a general overview of who we are and what we do. Also, I think Evandra mentioned it a moment ago, you did see the Globe article on July 1st that came out that referenced, that was a study done by Suffolk University Law School, who is one of our partners also, but they were funded by the Boston Foundation to do this study. And as a result, it found that there was a lot of discrimination against people of color, Black people, and voucher holders in the city of Boston. Since then, one of the things our office is doing is we are pursuing an opt-ed to respond to that article. One, to let folks know who we are, what we do as a commission, and also to let them know that it doesn't matter who it is that experiences any kind of, or if they believe there's some kind of discrimination that they've experienced, we will definitely— I didn't understand that. Sorry about that, Siri. We will definitely,
Siri's filing a complaint.
Siri is filing a complaint, I'm telling you. But we will definitely be here for them. They can file a complaint with our office and we will investigate it. That's one thing that came out of it. Secondly, we have entered into a partnership with BHA, because one of the things that happens here in the city of Boston is that if a city agency, there are 2 voucher holders in the city of Boston, or voucher providers, I should say, in the city of Boston, which is the BHA and Metro Housing Boston. If any of those organizations or any city department that deals with any kind of housing has complaints from any of their tenants or residents that they believe they're experiencing some kind of discrimination, those departments are not able to bring those cases before us. But what can happen is if they forward them to us, or if they refer them to us, we can be the complainant for the city of Boston. We have the power to do what is called a commission-initiated complaint, which means that the Fair Housing Commission will be the complainant and will investigate the case, and will take whatever necessary actions are necessary in order to remedy the discrimination that has taken place. We've also entered a partnership with Suffolk Law to contract them to do testing for us. The goal is to make sure all cases that where folks. I'm sorry, can you hear me? Hello? All right. So we've entered a partnership with, or in the process of entering a partnership with Suffolk Law, who actually did the testing for them to do testing for us. We are in the process of contracting them, so we will be able to sample the same groups of folks that they were able to sample, and even more moving forward. The testers are totally anonymous. Nobody knows who they are. We don't reveal any of that information. But again, the point of this is to make sure that we are going after bad actors in the city of Boston who engage in discriminatory practices, whether it's landlords, lenders, banks, real estate brokers, which is what the article highlighted. We've also been in conversation with MCAD, who's one of our partners in the Attorney General's office, who also does this work along with us to make sure that we are forming a stronger coalition of folks who will now be able to combat this issue and pretty much cast our net as wide as we possibly can, to make sure that we are really spreading awareness about this, and also making sure that we do everything humanly possible to eradicate housing discrimination in the city of Boston. So that's pretty much a quick synopsis of who we are, what we do, some of the things we're currently working on. Definitely, I'll give the two other commissioners a moment to say something. Any questions you guys have for us, we would be glad to answer and talk to you about.
Yes, everything that Will just said. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ego Vidike Ziti, and it is great to be here, see your faces, and also be part of this commission, this joint commission meeting, I guess is what we would call it. I'm also happy to be joined with my fellow commissioner, Commissioner Javier. The main thing I would add from the commission side is this, for the commissioners, is to make sure you get as much training as possible, and specifically as much hearing training as possible. Lawyers have more of an aptitude for the hearing. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Lawyers have more of an aptitude because of their training for the hearings, but for the non-lawyers, it's important to really, well, for everybody, but it's important for everybody to be comfortable with Robert's Rules of Order and just the way that a hearing is supposed to be conducted and all of that. Again, not all of us have been exposed to that, but it's important for you to get as much training in that area as possible. So that's what I'd want to stress as a fellow commissioner is training, especially since you all are developing and you're growing and you're getting started. Right now, you're probably meeting quite a bit because you are building the foundation. We meet roughly about once a month, and we do hearings as they come up. And the support team at the Boston Fair, at the Fair Housing Commission is just wonderful. I mean, they brief us on cases. We are also rely on them to kind of give us the details where you might not be able to pick up on stuff from reading the case. Just extremely accessible. And so I'm saying that because as you all build your culture, that has worked for us, and it has worked over a period of years, regardless of who the pieces have been. And Will has really brought to the commission a sense of cohesiveness. And so that's important. I heard you talking about communication. Communication is also key. We all have City of Boston emails, but I probably have never checked my City of Boston email. So they send it to my City of Boston email, and they also send it to my personal email. But that's because we need to do that for regulation purposes. But it's those types of ways that they support the commissioners to make sure that we're able to do what we need to do. Because at the end of the day, we want to be able to set policy. We want to be able to establish and further and advance the work. We want to be able to support Will and the others who are doing what they're doing. And one of the things that Will is really good about is just running stuff by us. Because we may not meet, we may only meet as a commission once a month, sometimes more than that, but generally once a month. And again, with times during the month when we may be coming in, or not now coming in to the office, but we may be meeting and doing hearings. He's really good with picking up the phone or dropping an email and just running stuff by us. And so that communication is going to be important as you guys continue to grow and develop. The most important thing I have to tell you is just it's training, training, training. Make yourself familiar with all of the processes and all of the regulations, and have a staff that's also prepared to help with that.
So can I ask the other commission, I'm back on my computer so I can see you all better. But for some reason, I can't get on video. You've just got my picture, but Susan, can you allow me to get on the video? Okay. So if you have a finding that
You
there's
should
been,
be able to now. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
that's all right. Now, okay, there we
you
are. So if you have a finding of that there's been discrimination, does it have the force of law, or can someone appeal to a court? And if you appeal to a court, is it a de novo hearing or is it an appeal? I'm going back to being a lawyer again. Okay. Judge, there's very little of that left, I assure you.
Our decisions can be appealed to a superior court, and the judge hears it de novo.
They do.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Javier. I'm the least tenured commissioner with the Office of Fair Housing. Just to fill in a couple quick details, I think from a big picture standpoint, what we do as commissioners is we primarily fill two roles. We act as traditional board members for the Office of Fair Housing. So we sit down at those meetings and we go through with each of the operational arms of the office, what they've done, what they're doing, what their objectives are for the year, what advancements they've made over the prior 30 days. We're looking at case intakes and investigations, making sure cases are being closed out in a timely fashion, and then also gauging the numbers, because the numbers reflect the ability of the marketing division of the office to get the name out and make people aware that this service exists and that there is a mechanism for them to seek retribution to the extent that they are a victim of some sort of discrimination. And then the second part, the operational part of our role as commissioners is, we serve in kind of either as an arbitrator to the extent the cases go to a formal hearing, as we serve as the kind of appellate judge, for lack of a better term, when there is a determination made by the office whether or not there's probable cause. And then we serve as a mediator in circumstances where we believe there's an opportunity to get a case resolved in advance of the office making a formal determination based upon the outcome of their investigation. And I apologize for the background noise. I'm supposed to take my daughter to soccer at 5:30, and that was her yelling at me because I'm not ready to go.
Yeah. Children always come first. So people have questions. Floor is open for questions.
Just to get a better sense of the office.
Ben, you might want, everybody introduced themselves while I was lost in the Heatherlands, so okay.
Sorry, Ben Goldberger, I'm one of the commissioners. Just to get a better sense of the office, what does your staff look like and what kind of volume of complaints do you guys deal with in a calendar year or
Yeah,
fiscal
no
year, however you track it?
So for the Office of Fair Housing and Equity, we have a staff at maximum capacity. We're about a staff of about 14 individuals at maximum capacity. The number of cases we deal with yearly, they range. So it all depends on, I think a lot of it depends on how much marketing, so to speak, that we do, because every year we have to make sure that we are very engaged in education and outreach. The name of the office in and of itself is extremely misleading. And why I say that is because when you hear the word fair housing, most people think that if they're having a problem with their landlord or something like that, or they can come to us, or we actually find housing for people, and that's not at all what we do. So this is the reason why education and outreach is important. One, to combat that, and two, because most folks aren't aware of their fair housing rights, and knowing that the Fair Housing Act is actually a federal law that all cities, states, towns have to abide by and incorporate. So I don't get off track anyway, but to answer your question, we're an office of about 14 at most. I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question,
So
Commissioner?
just order of magnitude, are you talking about dozens of complaints a year, hundreds of complaints a year?
So in a given year, like this year is probably one of the biggest years we've seen in a long time. We pulled out about 93 cases that we have done this year, which is double what we did last year.
And when you say a year, you mean since January or since last June, or?
So since our calendar year.
Yeah. Okay.
Since our calendar year, which begins, which starts over in, I want to say August or September, because we're on HUD's cycle.
Okay.
So in our own fiscal year, let me just call it that. That's probably,
It's
you're probably more used to that term. So in our own fiscal year, we've completed this year 93 cases, again, which is double what we've done. So we get paid for the cases that we actually do. HUD pays us for the cases that we do. So the more cases we do, the more money the commission brings in. So we've doubled what we're getting back this year from HUD, where we've doubled what we got last year.
So is it 12 months? We're talking over a 12-month period, whatever that is. Yeah.
I would say, yeah, absolutely.
12 months.
So Will, can I ask a quick question?
Please, go ahead.
So do you guys have enforcement rights? I mean, how?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. We are the substantial equivalent of HUD, so we have the same enforcement power HUD has.
Yeah. You may not have been here when I asked, they have enforcement rights, but the people can appeal to the Superior Court, and in appealing to the Superior Court is just like starting all over again.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think Ann had a question and Reyes has a question, both of you. So
naturally, when someone appeals to court,
Oh,
once it's taken out of the commission, the Attorney General takes over it for us. So
yeah, she becomes she's okay.
they now become
The plaintiff.
us. Right, exactly, the plaintiff.
Okay, Ann.
So first of all, full disclosure, I'm the CFO at Metropolitan Boston Housing Partnership, Metro Housing Boston. So I want to thank you for the work that you do. I've been in the housing field for over 20 years. And fair housing is something that I think people don't realize what an issue it really is for people if they haven't experienced discrimination themselves. So thank you very much for the work that you do. I was just curious about if you had an idea as to why the cases doubled in a year. To me, that's extraordinary.
The reason the cases doubled, I think, is because of the aggressive approach that we took. We did a lot of outreach, engagement and outreach. We spent a lot of time going to community meetings, Twitter, Facebook, but mainly community meetings and doing a lot of training the public, neighborhood to neighborhood, who we are, what we do, so folks will know their rights, know that we exist, which ended up being extremely beneficial because more people knew about us, then folks who were, it widened the pool of the folks who knew that they could bring a fair housing complaint to us. It did a substantial amount of advertising, substantial amount of trainings. So all those things paid off and led to us having a higher caseload.
The need was always there. It just, people didn't realize that they could access you.
Yes, ma'am. That's part of it. And the truth of the matter is, we get, even though we did 93, we probably took in more than that. And why I say that is because we spend a lot of time doing a lot of referrals. Again, the name of the office can be misleading. So we oftentimes, if people think, or if people are having problems with the landlords, it's not our, that's not our forte. That's not what we do. So we spent a good amount of time referring cases to other departments.
Grace, and then Lee.
Oh, yes, are your hearings open? I thought you said me.
No, I was pointing to Ray. Go ahead.
Are your meetings open to the public? Are your hearings open to the public, not the meetings?
Yes, sir, they are.
Okay.
Yes, one of your hearings?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I could observe one of your hearings and then.
You absolutely can. In fact, we would love for you guys to observe our hearings because the truth of the matter is, as I've said before, I believe that the Human Rights Commission is a twin agency of ours. We are just different sides of the same coin. The difference is that you guys can do things that we cannot do. So we're actually fair housing. We're actually the Office of Fair Housing, Equity, and Civil Rights, but you guys actually can do more on the civil rights end than we can. Our processes are very similar, I'm going to imagine, for the most part, and the commissioners are here just as a reference, if any, whether offline or online, whenever you guys would possibly like. I think it would be good for us to run through a few things together because they can definitely give you a lot of insight to how things actually work and how they run. And obviously, as time goes on, you're going to have your own culture of how you do things. But for the most part, the basic structure is the same,
Other questions? Yes.
Can you explain a little bit, how do you do education outreach? What kind of activities? Where do you go? Who do you send? Where?
Yes, Commissioner. So we have two folks that are dedicated to education and outreach. We have an education and outreach manager, and we also have another person that works under this manager. And so they go out to community meetings. They book community meetings. We work through the Office of Neighborhood Services to figure out when all the community meetings are happening. We send a lot of our leaflets and messaging and through the neighborhood newspapers as well too, through the Office of Neighborhood Services. We ourselves put things out on Facebook and Twitter. So that's generally how we do our education and outreach. We go to a number of different trainings that are required by HUD every year, where we meet other folks and share information, and that information gets passed out throughout the entire fair housing community and throughout the entire city of Boston and through the state, actually, to be honest. So some of the things we also do is we put our information on bus shelters and train stations when we're able to take out huge flyers or huge, what do you call those things? Those billboards, sorry. And we're able to take out billboards and things like that. And we have part of our funding is dedicated to that. So it's important for us to really engage in getting the word out. So we do it by just about any means necessary, we get it out. Shy of breaking the law.
That's good. Let me ask one other question. Is you will you go out and look at a pattern or a practice and then find a plaintiff? So if you see in a particular landlord who owns a lot of housing, that there's a pattern of discrimination, will you go and investigate that landlord?
That's exactly what we do.
Okay.
Also, that's the new reason for our renewed partnership with Suffolk Law Testing Program for this
Yeah.
specific purposes, because any landlords engaging in that kind of thing, where we see a pattern, we have the commissioners have the ability to fine them
Right.
a lot of money, one. And two, there are many different things that the commission can do to increase enforcement against such individuals. And also, that information we have also gets turned over to the administration for the administration to also take other measures that they see fit.
Yeah.
That
Great.
makes sense.
We ought to go because we've got a schedule. We really appreciate your coming. It's been very helpful. And Will, the president of the Realtors Association, lives in my building.
Oh, wow.
And when I mentioned I was going to be the chair of the Human Rights Commission, he said, we'd love to have you folks come. So I think it's you folks is Will, you folks come and talk to the realtors, because, you know, I ran into someone not long ago, a Black man who was, you know, in a very big job with a PhD and family, who was actually told by a realtor, this woman will not rent to you because you're Black. I mean, literally told her. And, you know, it's the kind of thing that, you know, I was like, are you kidding me? You know, and he was shocked. So it'd be interesting to have someone, you go talk to one of their meetings about that.
Absolutely. And I think an important thing I'd like to also let you guys know as commissioners is that any case, especially big cases, to enter the previous question again, if we see a situation, let's say, where we find a big management company or real estate company that's engaged in discriminatory practices, it's one thing for us to sanction them, but as the Human Rights Commission, you also can open up a case against them. And all the information we have is public information, so we would be glad to share it with you, because this gives us an opportunity to kind of double team, you know, situations where we have big landlords that have a ton of money, don't really adhere, in fact, don't adhere to fair housing laws, that are engaged in, you know, really gross discriminatory practices. And this gives us an opportunity to hit it from both angles, because I sincerely believe the only way these people, or people who do this kind of thing, learn a lesson or learn not to do it, is when they get sanctioned by multiple agencies that can do something to them.
Yeah.
You know, so you as the Human Rights Commission can take a crack at the apple for a second time, even after or even during while we're handling the case.
Well, you have a new partner, I assure you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Truly a
And
pleasure.
we look forward to working with you, all of us.
Thank you.
And I thank the commissioners for coming too. We really appreciate you joining us. And we will see you again. I think some of us, how often do you meet?
We meet usually once a month, sometimes a little more, but generally once a month.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
All right. Evandro, you want to introduce our next guest?
Yes, I believe she's joined us since the beginning. The
Okay.
next part of the agenda includes, you know, for us to continue to have a conversation from folks in dealing with immigrant rights. Obviously, we talked with the city department. And now I figured it'd be helpful to hear from Eva Malona, who is the, I think a title is executive director. I'm not 100% sure, but she's the lead at MIRA, which is the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugees Coalition. They do statewide policy work and a ton of great work. So happy to have her on. Assume she's on. There she is.
Yeah.
Yes, she is. So
Yeah.
we're happy to have her. And after her, we have Natalisha Tracy, who's the executive director for Brazilian Worker Center in Brighton. She also does a lot of work in this space. So I figured it'd be helpful to hear from the nonprofit world about some of the issues that they encounter, so we can again try to focus on what we can do to add to what they're doing.
So welcome to both of you. And Eva, I know your organization well because Leslie's students, a lot of them volunteered at Mira in teaching ESL, and you did a lot of good work, I know, and I knew you from my Cambridge days, so welcome. And to both of you, what we would love to learn from you is how we specifically can be helpful. What are the major issues that you think we could help with in terms of education information, but basically actions? And one of the things we look at, which you might have heard me say before, is patterns and practices. I mean, what do you see in the community that have an adverse effect on the communities you deal with that you think we might be able to be helpful with? So welcome. Eva, you want to go first?
Sure. So thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you tonight. So I am the president and CEO of the Mass Coalition for Immigrants and Refugees. We are the largest entity in New England promoting and enhancing immigrant rights and immigrant integration. We are a membership organization, so our membership is very diverse, over 130 groups. Who do great work, from legal services to community-based work to refugee resettlement to legal service agencies and health and faith-based organization. And the Brazilian Immigrant Center is also an amazing organization and a great partner and member of MIRA. So we were created back in 1986 when the passage of IRCA happened, and President Reagan signed into law the Immigration Control and Reform Act. And groups like ours were formed in other parts of the United States to really work on the integration of immigrants, integration of the, at the time, newly legalized, but focusing on immigrant and refugee integration. We see that as a two-way process, one by which the newcomers do everything that they can to linguistically and economically and socially and politically integrate, but also the receiving society provide systems in place and make that transition helpful to them. And so the only direct service that MIRA does is supporting immigrants to become citizens. So that's the only direct service that we do. We serve our members, and our agendas are driven by our membership based on what the needs of immigrant and refugee communities are. But we see that as a big picture, by helping and investing in immigrant integration, it's an investment for our Commonwealth and it's an investment for the country. So the picture in Massachusetts is there are 1.2 million foreign born who are very much part of our fabric. 55% have been naturalized. There are over 280,000 other green card holders, and then 250,000 undocumented immigrants. And the last 3.5 years have been extremely difficult for immigrants and refugees. You've seen that the federal government has really transformed immigration policy and immigration practices through executive orders. So the families have been significantly impacted. And I'm talking about general, immigration, not just the undocumented immigrants, but from refugees to asylum seekers, to people, to children at the borders, to family-based immigration, to high-skilled immigrants. So it's across the board an attack and a completely dramatically changed immigration policy. And then COVID hit on top of that. So the immigrants, there was a double hit for families. And as immigration, it's a federal issue, and immigration reform is overdue to really deal with, with the system and providing the path for people to, that immigration status is not an issue anymore. But there are a lot of things that can be done at the state level and also at the local level to really help with this population and their needs. So at the time before the pandemic, there were, in response to what was happening at the federal level, there were two very important pieces of legislation that were introduced. One was the driver's license, and the other one is the Safe Communities Act that both dealt with the first one. The driver's license is an issue that has been for a long time a problem in Massachusetts because immigration status was a huge barrier. And the Work and Mobility Act that was introduced this session would have addressed that issue and given everyone who drives in Massachusetts the right to get licensed and get insurance. Many attempts over the years, but the current bill in the legislature was attached to the police reform and then to the economic recovery bill, but that was pulled out of at this session. But one thing that you can do is really to provide a strong advocacy that the driver's license is a matter of public safety, a matter of public health, and will really address the issue of transportation for immigrants. The other bill that is also helpful at the state level, it's the Safe Community Act that really addresses the fears that have been so present in the, not just in the last 4 years, even before, but worse under the current regime and the zero tolerance policy that is coming from the federal level. People are really afraid to access services, to access testing, to access any benefits out of fear of COVID, out of fear of, protecting their family members. And we've seen this again and again. So, so those two things can be solved at the state level. And the other thing is, creating the language access. It's another big issue. It has been, but especially now under COVID, that is an enormous barriers for people, accessing unemployment and, all the applications online. We've done a lot of advocacy, and we're very grateful that we have received a lot of support, from the governor and from the legislature, and a lot of those needs, some of the needs have been addressed. So there are now applications, in 5 languages, but, given that Massachusetts has the most diverse population, at least 11 languages are needed in that regard. So the language access remains a huge, huge issue. In addition to the other bills that I mentioned, the cash assistance for families, it's really crucial. Philanthropy has played a role. Our mayor created the Resilience Fund. The governor also created a very inclusive fund that, it's helping community-based groups and it's helping the most vulnerable families. We're very grateful for that. The legislature also just approved in the supplemental budget 10 million for vulnerable families and 20 million on the housing piece, but the need is much, much higher. As I said, immigrants are hit really hard, and they lost their jobs and income, and especially for the families who are in mixed status households, families, people who have different immigration statuses, the fear of deportation, the fear of removal, it's constant, it's real, it's present, and that is a huge barrier for families, and many people are going further and further underground. So that is that remains a huge issue. So any advocacy, our delegation, it's it's always very very strong. But reaching out to their colleagues and pushing for an immigration reform that really serves the country, but it works for the newcomers and addresses all the the dysfunctional pieces of our immigration system, it's key. Other important issues are also the budget issues at the local level and at the state level to address the needs for adult basic education, for ESOL, for the workforce, but also a need to support immigrant businesses and immigrant-owned businesses, but also those businesses who hire and have a lot of immigrants as part of their workforce. So that's an area that help is needed and advocacy it's needed as well. And one last thing that I wanted to say is also for, we just did a survey that we'll announce tomorrow. We have a whole event. We did a statewide survey to look into the COVID-19 impact in our community, and one of the 433 responses came, and the survey was done in 15 languages. And one of the most consistent needs is, the cash assistance for the families, and also addressing the fears, access to health. Childcare was a huge, huge issue, and also inclusiveness, especially for those who are taxpayers and are not benefiting from the stimulus package. And there are thousands of them here in Massachusetts. So there is another bill that addresses that issue at the state level. So advocacy on the tax bill that has been introduced, the sick leave needs also to be strengthened as well. And there are a couple of other bills at the state level that are dealing with housing and adding more resources to that barrier. Another big thing that will impact Massachusetts also is a segment of the population that is currently under temporary protected status,
Right.
and DACA, Deferred Action for
Right.
Childhood Arrival. They are doing okay for the time being, but because of the end of the status and the limbo status, actually, that's it's very much in limbo, and those people may lose status and lose all the benefits and jobs and income that they have for the moment. So that will impact us over thousands of people in Massachusetts.
So even
12,000,
we should
8,000.
move on to your colleague, and I think we're concerned with all the issues you're concerned with. I'm concerned with what we can do as a commission. I wish we could fix DACA. I think we all wish we could fix DACA. It's so unfair for a 3-month-old to be sent back to a country they literally have never lived in and probably don't speak the language. But we can advocate in as much as we can. But I'd like to move on to your colleague and listen to her, and then I'd like to think about, as a commission in Boston, are there specific things? I mean, one of the things I'm concerned about is immigrant rights. Immigrants have rights, and do they know what they are? And do city agencies that they deal with know what rights immigrants have, or don't they? Do we need to do something about that? In dealing in the city, do people who they deal with know that immigrants have rights? So that I'm curious about, as we hear from your colleague, about some of those issues in terms of what we can do about education information to our colleagues in the city and city agencies. Is that a problem? And is there anything else that we can do as a commission in terms of information, education, or enforcement, besides being advocates? I mean, we have some authority, some little authority, and subpoena authority, a hearing authority, and data collection, and so I'm curious about, are there specific things you see that are a problem, particularly in Boston, that we might take a look at?
Okay, thank you for a good afternoon. I would like to thank Evandro for inviting me to this space. My name is Natalicia Tracy. I am the Executive Director of the Brazilian Workers Center. The Brazilian Workers Center is a 25-year-old organization that was created by immigrant workers for immigrant workers who are dealing with issues of wage violations, marginalization, and exploitation in the state of Massachusetts. And they came together and created this organization 25 years ago to work on advocacy, education, organizing, leadership, capacity building, research policy, but most importantly, to bring people together to learn about their rights so they will know how to defend themselves. The mission continues strong in that direction. We center our work around issues of immigrants' rights, workers' rights, discrimination, health and safety at the workplace. The record today showed that nationwide, the Latinos, Portuguese and Spanish-speaking immigrant workers are number one getting hurt, falling and getting hurt in construction in most of the jobs that they are in. So we also make sure that the workers know they have the right to training, they have the right to protective equipment, and we work closely with the Department of Labor Division of OSHA and have an alliance to ensure that workers have the most access to those information and training. We have trained almost 6,000 workers already on fall prevention here in the state of Massachusetts. In addition, workers' rights dealing with wage theft is one of the core issues that we see here. We received about 5,000 intake per year, and turning off the AC here is a little loud in my head. About 60% of those intakes are wage issues. They either connected with wage violation, non-payment of wages, violation of overtime, or no payment at all, violation of people having a break, violation of illegal deductions in their pays. So we process those cases. We are part of a fair wage campaign, and we have a close relationship with the Attorney General's office, where cases that cannot be resolved here, we can refer them to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office also give us PRA letters so we can take cases to small claim courts when the worker decide that's the best pathway to resolve their problems. So we are part of this very large network of support for our community, because we understand that they are dealing with the COVID. There was a shift on some of the work to provide food and relief, a small fund relief. So we've been actually on our 16th week providing food distribution and baby diapers. We didn't know there were so many babies in the neighborhood here in Boston. So we give about 3,000 diapers per week. We are just, since we started, we have served over 10,000 families and over 35,000 bags of groceries. And 1/3 of those families that came here for support have been children. So our work continued to evolve with COVID. We are seeing a lot of violation of housing rights. We have dealt with people being thrown out their homes because they don't have immigration status. So immigration status is a huge problem in our communities of immigrants, because even though if they have rights, it is very difficult to convey to them they have rights. They understand they have rights, but in some situations, it's really difficult for them to exercise those rights because of retaliation. But every day we work with many partners to ensure that they know they can count on us, and there are anti-retaliation laws with the Attorney General's office, with the Department of Labor, Wage and Hour Division, and also in many cases, we can make a call for them, keeping them out of that situation and giving them written documents saying that they have rights. So that's a little bit of what we do. I'm going to stop here. And if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them. And we're very grateful for the partnership with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement that have given us incredible support and have helped us leverage a lot of resources to support our community.
myself. So you try to resolve these wage and labor disputes yourself,
That's right.
informally. I mean, you don't have any authority to, but informally you try to participate and conciliate with companies or others yourself.
Well, we are a worker center. A worker center by its nature has the power to the right to actually advocate and resolve them, negotiate and mediate some of those cases on our own, right? So, and we do a lot of that for many years. There in the country altogether, there are about 226 worker centers that do similar work that we do. Here in Boston, there are 9 of them.
I see. Okay, great. And if it doesn't work, you can send them to the Labor Department or the Attorney General.
Correct. But
And
we
tell
resolve
me a sense of the volume that you have of those kinds of complaints.
We receive about 5 to 10 complaints per week. Many of them is just end up being education about minimum wage, you know, what you can say to your employer, how to negotiate better pay. And a lot of them, about 3 out of 10 becomes formal complaints that we file using regular forms, regular letters. You know, we have like sort of perfecting this work already. And in addition, we do public shaming when we get big corporations or they do not want to pay, and we have tried to negotiate, have sent a letter, have talked with them. We group of workers, we do public shaming. So we get all our friends, all our colleagues, and we go to the front of the restaurants. We go where we are, hotels, and make sure they understand that it's a violation of labor laws and they need to pay.
Okay, I don't want to get in trouble with you. Okay. Okay, other questions for our guests here? It was very helpful, extremely helpful.
I don't have a real question, but I have a comment.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that all immigrants know that if a child is in the custody of the state, DCF, that the judge can sponsor their citizenship.
Yes, there are provisions to help. Yes, that's true for.
I did a number of kids.
You're speaking to a judge, Eva. The gentleman you just heard from was a judge. So he's just trying to inform all the rest of us that that's possible. So but this is one of the things that I'm talking about is how well known is that to all of the agencies that deal with immigrants in the city and nonprofits as well who deal with immigrants, you know? And is there a way we can be helpful there? I don't know.
Well, training and education, it's always needed so people understand how immigration status interferes with a lot of things. And there are things that immigration status is a barrier for eligibility, but education and outreach, it's really important, and understanding the complexities of immigration law and policy, and having those things part of the education about the rights of workers and all of that, it's really important. So outreach and education and clarification and materials in different languages are very helpful as well.
Right.
It's also important to push DCF to move forward with those cases.
Yeah.
Quite often they don't.
Right. And you know, and whose job is that to remind them and remind the people who are in their care, inform the people who are in their care that they have these rights, you know, because they're basically children, right? Or CASA volunteers who serve that population as well, who probably don't know this either. Interesting. Well, I want to thank our guests, and I also want to welcome a new member of the mayor's cabinet, Dr. Carolyn Crockett. I see you are Dr. Crockett. You are a member of our audience, but I'm going to pull you forward to say hello and welcome you to have you welcome us, maybe, but welcome you and appreciate your joining us. And maybe while you're here, is we're so glad that you have joined the city. I have read all about you, and I am thrilled that you are here, and you will pull all of us who have these interests together. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about your job, because we're all so glad you're here. And it couldn't be a better time for you, because now you'll have nothing to do, you know.
Commissioner McKenna, too kind. Thank you for your leadership and really standing at the helm of this work and helping us to really relaunch the Boston Human Rights Commission. It's incredible, an incredible journey that this work has been on, and I cannot think of a better time to really lean into the work, and I cannot think of a better group of commissioners to be able to welcome and to work with. And with you at the helm here, I know we're in more than good hands. So thanks for just taking some time to let me say hello. So big work here. There's big work, and I am thrilled and delighted that Evandro's work is leading us forward here with the commission, but really happy that this work sits in the heart of the Equity and Inclusion Cabinet, which is a set of 6 departments that I am fortunate to be in partnership with. So in addition to the Human Rights Commission, we bring with us the Mayor's Office of Diversity with Chief Donnie Tavares, the Office of Resilience and Racial Equity with Chief Lori Nelson, Office of Immigrant Advancement, which we know is with Yusuf Wali, who may be on this call as well. Also the Office of Women's Advancement, which is of course led by Tanya Del Rio. And also the Office of Language and Communications Access. And so Jennifer Wong is that work had formerly sat within the Health and Human Services Cabinet. And so we bring with us a set of departments who have equity right at their heart. And I, as the Chief of Equity, first ever in the city, and tasked with this exciting work, which is to say, to help the city actually define what equity even is. And so I say this as someone who had just spent 2 years teaching at MIT, where I created the Equity and Inclusion graduate seminar, which actually has turned into to be a very hot ticket class, very much oversubscribed the last 2 years. We had a big waiting list. And so in the class, I say to folks, what is equity? This word is very, overused and very popular, but unless we take some time to really define what equity is, we risk losing the race before it started. So if we take a real hearty understanding of what racial inequity means, what is health inequity, what is economic inequity and exclusion, and try to hold ourselves accountable to this definition, my work is to help stand up this strategy and this vision within my own cabinet, and to walk that across the mayor's entire cabinet. So it is certainly true that Mayor Walsh has had a commitment to equity, intersectional equity, from the beginning. I mean, he comes to this as a labor organizer, someone from the neighborhood, someone working on the Hill as a state rep for all these years. And so wants to know, what else can government do in this space? And how can we do a better job of coordinating that work? And so that's a big part of my role, is to say, what does it mean to have a person dedicated to really thinking about these questions, this work, policies, procedures, regulations, investments, and how do we root out systemic racism? And how do we think about anti-Black racism as a central part of this conversation, and a part of what has been the foundation of this country, unfortunately. So not a new fight, but a fight with renewed intensity and focus in the heart of this administration. And so that doesn't get accomplished by one person or one role or one office, even a cabinet. And I can say this because it's true in terms of what it means to have institutional transformation. But I can also say this as a researcher who's just spent 2 years literally critiquing equity chiefs across the country, including the chief of equity in Chicago with Mayor Lightfoot. I've looked closely at Mayor Lance Bottom's work in Atlanta, Mayor Carter's work in St. Paul, Mayor Schaaf's work in Oakland. And so I don't know if this is like the universe getting just revenge on me, since I've had so much critique about these kinds of positions and these kinds of initiatives. And now the proof is in the pudding. So now I have to kind of make good on what it means to actually have a city and a mayor be laser focused on equity as a cross-cutting, cross-functional strategy for transformation. But what's also true is that you don't do this work alone or in a vacuum, and government can't do it all. So I can do some work to stand up a strategy and a set of frameworks for City Hall, and I am happy and delighted to do that in partnership with the mayor. But then the work will be walking that outside of City Hall to look at the entire city and think about who our partners are. So in the private sector, what do we know that needs to happen there, and what is the private sector willing to do? What does it mean to think about this in the context of the educational arena? All our schools, our universities and colleges, and even healthcare. And so who are the folks there who can really be in partnership with us again to really elevate this vision around what cross-sectional equity can be? So a big role, for sure, humbling role. I'm grateful for the fact that this is not my first time in government. I was here before returning to MIT. I was here in City Hall working as the Director of Economic Policy and Research in the Office of Economic Development with John Barrows. And so we did a lot of work there to really think again about equity for small businesses, equity for workers in the construction industry. We did a lot of work around the Boston Resident Jobs Policy, also in partnership with Chuck Turner and many advocates who were able to help us really move the needle on that important set of policies. So not my first rodeo here. I know how challenging it can be to get things done in bureaucracy and in City Hall. And also as a scholar of history and a researcher, I know well our history. I know the potential of our history, and I also know the warts and the trauma of our history as a city. So really excited to bring all that to bear, and delighted again to just be here in the in this space, in this call, in the work of the Human Rights Commission, because it's so much of what is happening here in terms of speaking truth to power, bringing justice to wrongs, institutionally and individually. That work is massive. So hats off. Passionate about the work, and passionate because I admire and respect so many of you on the commission. There's some old friends here, some new friends I look forward to making, and I'm really grateful for the conversation.
Well, thank you. I don't know whether we have a couple of questions here. Anybody wants to ask? I don't know, one or two. We're getting toward the end of our Judge.
Well, I know Judge Harris will straighten it out quickly.
Yeah,
so
well,
go ahead and ask the question.
I found that out already.
I mean, really, and I also know that Leonard Lee will take us to task in 5 seconds. So people need to speak up quickly, because this is the House will make it right. I know that.
I did have a question. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I did have a question.
Yeah.
And Carolyn, you know, I respect you and your work, and
likewise.
I am so excited of you being there because it gives me hope in my city. I appreciate you. One of the things that's really a focus of mine right now is there hasn't been, even though Black men have been victims, direct victims for a very long time, and not only from homicides and marginalizations and all the other stuff since the beginning of slavery. There really hasn't been a lot of people talking about a focused support for Black men, just dealing with the trauma of seeing their image killed over and over again. And mind you, when I say that, I'm not discounting Black women, Black children, or Black community. But right now, and this has been for a very, as you know, you're a scholar. I know you know this. There seems to be people exploiting the opportunity of the death of a Black man and really not giving focus support around their journey. And I'm hoping through all this new resurgence of racism and equity, and that people will help design some programs to help Black men heal from this consistent trauma that we've been dealing with since the beginning of time. There's been very, very little conversations about that. And it seems like when I bring it up, people want to dilute it, and no disrespect, they want to dilute it with other issues and say, well, what about this? What about women? What about? And I try to explain to people that if you look at the numbers, and I'm talking from a public health perspective, I'm talking about from a public safety perspective, I'm talking about mass incarceration perspective, I'm talking about the design of Black males in school systems from the kindergarten all the way up into high school. There's been a focused, concentrated effort for the destruction of Black males. But there hasn't been a focused effort of how do we help strengthen that chain so it's not weak anymore. You had any thoughts on that in terms of as you come in, it won't be diluted, they'll be customized. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about AIDS or drug. I'm talking about just a regular, from a foundation standpoint, a man of color who's dealing just with the trauma of living in a society that always shows them in an extremely negative light.
Yes. No, and thank you so much for your question and your analysis and your witness on this point. When the mayor called me and asked me to think about this role, it was very unexpected. I have to say, I didn't actually know that the city had been thinking about this kind of a position or this cabinet or anything. And I was in my kitchen washing dishes and the phone rang. And it was the mayor. And he was talking to me about some of the challenges that he was seeing in the city, and particularly he started talking to me about George Floyd and how much, like, so many of us just standing upside down in the aftermath of seeing this man, this Black man, murdered as a result of state-sanctioned violence, the hands of the police. And the mayor was talking about the way that it was sort of putting him almost outside of himself as a politician, as a person, just trying to grapple with what do we do knowing and seeing this. And so I said to him, well, you know, what do you think? And he said, this is a time for us to go strong, bold, to hold our communities and think about what else we can do to deliver on justice, to deliver on what this means for communities that have been wounded over and over again over time. And I said, you know, again, when we think about equity and what that is, that word kind of doesn't mean so much because it's everywhere. And I said, what do you see, Mayor, as like a central issue that we should be thinking about? And he started talking about the racial wealth gap very explicitly, and a way to think about, again, this woundedness, this the lack of assets, the lack of resources, the lack of connectivity for Black people, and certainly in that conversation, Black men. And so the question is, what does that start to look like as a set of, for me, as a set of policies, regulations, investments that the city could consider alignment on? And so for me, the racial wealth gap and the many implications that are there around what even does wealth look like. So we know this figure of $247,000 for a white family versus $8 for a Black family. That's one slice of the thing. But when I think about wealth, I think even more broadly in terms of a community's sense of itself, its resilience, its ability to hold ground, to keep itself safe, that type of knowledge that often is missing, that sense of purpose, that sense of, that's an internal thing. That's on top of the structural forces that keep you from being able to participate and provide for yourself. So for me, very explicitly, Leonard, and to kind of drill into it, this question around recognition or protection of Black men is an important work. And even thinking about the city's My Brother's Keeper work, I know work you know about. The question is, what else can we layer on top of this and be intentional about that is protecting, safeguarding, and equipping people in our city to be able to live well and to thrive? So for me, that's not just a rhetorical answer or something to just think about. It's very much at the center of why this work is so important. I also did not mention that also as a part of my portfolio is the Racial Equity Fund. And this fund is meant to be, it's a new fund the mayor has announced as a pool of money and thought, for sure, that sits outside of the city's budget. And I mention this because, and thinking about racial inequity very explicitly, the mayor has talked about the fund having a 50-year horizon. And when he said it, I kind of did, I made that sound too. I kind of did a double take. When he said it, I said, did he say 15, like 1, 5? Because that's a lot. Without even realizing he said 50. And so the idea that you would start to imagine generational change is what that horizon means. What does it mean to imagine structural change across a generation or two? And how powerful and almost disorienting to me to think of the government having that kind of imagination. And the mayor saying, we have got to think bold and we've got to think differently about where we want to wind up. Now, you and I know it's impossible to predict that what will happen tomorrow or the next day. But to start something, a work like the Racial Equity Fund with the intention from the beginning built in of a 50-year vision is powerful. So I would love to talk to you and others certainly about what that means, because we're still putting together the steering committee and starting to think about what the public process around the fund is, but it's very different obviously from the Boston Resiliency Fund or the One Boston Fund, which were funds set up in the midst of an acute emergency. So the Resiliency Fund was stood up very quickly to help us deal with the challenge and the crisis of the pandemic, and then it will go away. Right? So this is a different kind of fund where we're imagining a much more long-term, deliberate effort that is truly about these kinds of impacts and traumas that you referenced, Leonard, and gives us a chance to kind of dream into that a little bit. So a perfect question, a provocative question. I would love to pick up the conversation with you offline. For sure.
My questions. You know, I had them written out. He stole them. Carolyn, please let me know.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Judge Harris. Appreciate that.
You know, in college campuses, Black men are disappearing. They're disappearing from college campuses.
And the law school is almost completely
going down, not stable. They're going down in this country.
Well,
I mean, it's absolutely scary. And you know, I saw the numbers when I was on the Mass Board of Elementary and Secondary in terms of discipline numbers for Black boys. I mean, the disparity is frightening. I mean, 4-year-olds being suspended from school, 4-year-olds being suspended from school, it is just really scary. But when you see the numbers in college campuses, it really is frightening what's happening in this country. It's just headed in the wrong direction. So we ought to wind up. You know, some of us had the opportunity, at least I had the opportunity, and if you didn't, maybe tonight you get the opportunity to see some of the John Lewis memorial today. I met him. See, I'm old, so I met him.
I'm not taking that, Margaret.
I met him when I was still a civil rights lawyer and worked with him when I was in the Carter administration. He was in the Carter administration. He actually, when I was at Lesley, we actually gave him an honorary degree. So I've known him over the years, and to, you know, it sort of gives you hope when you hear people talk about him and you hear his last words. And you know, there'll be lots of it tonight if you didn't hear it, but I mean, it was amazing to me to have known him, and then to see and hear today people talk about him, and to hear President Bush and President Obama, right? You think like, wow, this is what the world used to be like, right? We used to be able to do this. That's amazing. It's just amazing. And a 12-year-old boy and a 91-year-old man, right? I just like, wow, this we can do this again. It's just, we just have to learn how. We have to remember and learn how. No, so we're thrilled. I just get a little taken aback by calling you Chief Crockett.
I just, it's like, it's not really Chief Crockett. I mean, it's like, you know, it's like a police chief. I mean, Chief Crockett is like interesting. So
totally fine.
no, but I mean, that is the title, right? It's Chief Crockett.
So that means I can't call you the Queen Bee? I can't call you the Queen Bee of the City of Boston anymore?
Only if you bring me some honey.
I will bring you some honey. I promise. I just harvested some today.
That's 100%. Yes.
Well, we're thrilled that you're here, and we're thrilled that you joined us. And I'm sure we will all be working with you again. And clearly, we want to find the space where we're needed. We don't want to duplicate what others are doing. We are action oriented. We want to find patterns and practices we can have the most impact. And we're looking to you because you'll have had a broader view than we will. So I'm looking forward to our chat. And
same here, right? Because
we're thrilled that you're here.
The word is out that you all are meeting and convening.
Yeah.
And I know that because my inbox reflects the awareness of the Human Rights Commission. And so I look forward to sharing with you much of what's in my inbox and in my voicemail stream, because I have a feeling that many people there are actually looking for all of you commissioners. So I look forward to making those connections for you.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. So we're going to move to, if there are any public comments. We're really over our time here, but if there are members of the public, we'll now have an opportunity to ask questions. I don't think there are many who have joined us today, but you could raise your hand or type your question in the chat application via the Zoom meeting platform on the side. Or press 9 to raise your hand, or you can send your questions to a staff via email at susanhemley@boston.gov. So I don't know whether anybody has questions, or we'll be glad to listen to them. While we're waiting, if there are any, my suggestion for August is, if it's okay with the commissioners, is that we would meet is it the 13th? The 13th, but not the second.
Not the 27th.
Not
the 27th.
So we would do one meeting in August, then go back to the 2 meetings in September, if that's okay with people. Give people that last Thursday in August off. It's right. So is that okay with people? We'll give you that week off. Give us some time to do some work. And
we do have one public comment. It's from Haroon Rashid.
Yeah. And the comment is, I don't see it.
I think
you should be able to unmute yourself.
We had this problem before.
Yes.
I don't know why this happens every time.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, great. I'm glad that I can finally reach you. Listen, I sat through these meetings because it's very important for me to reach you guys. I've been in your shoes, whether you accept it or not. Been there, done that. But this is something more important to me right now that I've been fighting for over, pretty close to 20 years here in Boston about Crispus Attucks. You know, I was away for years. I'm from Boston. I lived in Chicago for most of my adult life as a social activist, as I think some of you know. And with that being said, when I came back to Boston to look out for my mother, I found out that one of the problems that existed before I left that we addressed years ago about Crispus Attucks being a secret, more or less. And when his life or story was told, it was always told in the most dark way, about a Black man who got shot and bled blood in the street, and it ended at that. But that's not what I was taught, and that is not what I teach. His commitment in America was for human rights. That's what you guys stand for. He was the first person to die for human rights that is recognized internationally. I watched Reverend Al Sharpton last week talking about what just happened to George Floyd, and he broke the case about, oh, and what about Crispus Attucks, who gave his life for freedom and human rights? I don't want it to be something that is played off as though not important because for whatever reason, it's not on your agenda. It's on America's agenda. And one of the things that I think we could do, or we should do, and you should do, is to do something about the image of this man in Boston as it relates to his legacy in America. Because when your tourists come here and they hear about him or knew about him and they look for him, it's a secret. When I went to the post office to get a stamp made for Crispus Attucks, they told me, sure, we'll help you with that. And they showed me a stamp in Antigua and another Caribbean island of Crispus Attucks, but there was none in America. In America, we kind of gave up, in particular, sorry. And particularly, I'm gonna drop this, but I want to make this clear because I tried to get this message across, as you know, more than once. And when this organization started rising up, establishing commissioners, as you may all be, as you all are, I knew then and there, that's why I went to your commissioner, Rondo, and had a conversation with him about this. This is something that people really want to see action on. So how can we do it? As I said before, if there's no image of this man in the city, that when people come here that they can lay eyes on him, but when you go over to City Hall and you see Bill Russell with a statue, and you look in front of Faneuil Hall and you see Samuel Adams and Paul Revere and everybody but the man who started it off for your freedom, Crispus Attucks, a Black man from Boston, not New York. In Chicago, they have images of Crispus Attucks. Here in Boston, you do not. And it's a shame and a disgrace. So that being said, I am asking to help put a statue, a first-time statue in the city of Boston to show that we're not apathetic about a man who gave his life for your human rights. I was bragging about you being the Human Rights Commission and not protecting the image and elevating the person who made all this possible is insulting. So, all that being said, I'm gonna end it with this. I've made some comments to the mayor, city council. We're gonna try to bring it up as a line item to vote on, but we need the Commission on Human Rights to be that voice that not only understands, that is willing to project and fight for it. Because let me tell you one more thing. Youth are looking at you. They understand. I'm making sure that they understand. They're looking. I bring them down to City Hall to the council meetings. Now I'm about to zoom them into these meetings. They need to know what the leaders are feeling and saying and talking about things as critical as this. So you can forget the past and talk about the present, and you can talk about Floyd and everybody else. But if you don't do something that has been an insult to people of color since the beginning of our independence, it's shameful. I'm sorry I'm so emotional about it, but I am. And this is my first opportunity to speak to you about it.
We've been reading your comments, I assure you, even though you haven't been able to speak. We've been reading your comments every week, so don't feel unheard. We have heard you before at these meetings, so we appreciate that this time you've been able to speak. So thank you.
I would like to see some action, because conversation don't mean nothing till it's put to practice.
I understand that.
Me coming to you, talking about, I heard you giving credit to everybody else and say, yeah, let's get it together. But I ain't heard that from you yet. And I promise you, you haven't heard the last from me. So,
I'm sure that's
saying.
I'm sure that's
Appreciate you. Appreciate you.
I'm sure that's true. All right, we are 15 minutes over our time.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, can I just
Yeah.
1 second? You know, I want to see if we can, if for a second,
Yeah.
have a second of silence for losing two of our great icons, C.T. Vivian, and of course John Lewis. John Lewis was a dear friend. Mike Collins is a good friend of mine, and my daughter was an intern at with John Lewis for a couple of summers. So I would be remiss if I didn't say if we can take a moment of silence for losing two great, C.T. Vivian and John Lewis.
And
I
can we add
appreciate
Mimi
that.
Jones to that, please?
I'm
Could I
sorry?
add Mimi Jones?
Mimi Jones.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
You can, let me suggest that you make that as a motion to, that the Human Rights Commission officially take a moment of silence to remember these three icons of the
Yes.
civil and human rights.
Thank you, Judge Harris. Thank
And I
you. Yes.
ask for a second.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Why don't we take a moment of silence? Okay, thank you, Lee, for doing that. I appreciate it.
And Margaret,
Yeah.
my wife is a Leslie graduate, just so you know.
Ah, smart woman. All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So
Motion.
moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much. And I will see you in August.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I thank
Call
you.
you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.